This episode of the Astro Powder Powdcast is brought to you by Gema. Synchronized monitoring and control of your entire automated process is the core of Gema's Magic Control 4.0 data management systems, with options like line management, offering deeper insight into productivity and consumption, or energy management, allowing you to monitor and save both energy and air consumption, or batch management, offering tracking of powder used to coat production batches. Gema provides the very best in technology and connectivity for smarter factory automation. To learn more about Gema's Magic Control 4.0 data management systems, visit CompleteItWithGema.com. When you want to know that everything is covered, complete it with Gema.
The views and opinions expressed by the Astro Powder Podcast may not necessarily reflect those of the ChemQuest Group.
Hello, all you powder coating fans, and welcome to this special PC Summit edition of the Ask Joe Powder Powdcast. I'm your host, Joe Powder, aka Kevin Biller, and with me, as always, is my colleague, sidekick, and Gus White's uncle, Nathan. He's ChemQuest Powder Coating Research Group's formulator dude.
Hey everybody, we're broadcasting from the ChemQuest Powder Coating Research Studios in Columbus, Ohio. The purpose of the Ask Joe Powder Podcast is to bring news and technical know-how to the global powder coating community. Let's get it rolling.
Okay, but before we do,
Shout out.
I want to give a shout out to the people that made the Powder Coating Summit and also the PC Kitchen a reality. We were quite busy a week ago, September 21st and 22nd with the summit, 2 days before that with the PC Kitchen. So this episode's shout out goes to the producers, BNP Media and our fine friends there, the exhibitors, sponsors, the speakers, and the attendees of these two great events. Thanks for your help and participation. I think things went really well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea for, our discussion today. We can just talk about the show, how it went, and some of the highlights, and go over, some of the topics that were covered. First of all, like you said, Monday, Tuesday was the PC Kitchen, which is, it's our formulator short course, but this was actually the first time we've done the 2.0, the advanced formulating session. And I thought it went really well. We had a really great group of people there. We covered a bunch of topics, including low temperature cure and matting techniques and UV cure, clear coats, more of the advanced formulating topics as compared to the normal PC Kitchen.
Yeah, the PC Kitchen 1.0 or the fundamentals teaches the basics about resins, about curing agents, about fillers and pigments, additives, a little bit about processing and application. This 2.0 is digging in deeper with more specific formulating techniques. And I agree. It went really well. We had a great group of people. We had 12 very eager and enthusiastic attendees. And it was great.
All right. Well, let's talk about the summit.
We kicked off the summit with a really great talk by Alessia Venturi, who is the chief editor, but also one of the co-founders and owners of International Paint and Coatings magazine, which is produced out of Italy. Her talk was on smart coatings, and specifically smart powder coatings. And as these times will dictate, with Alessia hailing from Italy, she was unable to travel in person, so she recorded her presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was a good way to kick it off, though, because she was talking about new trends and, how future technology fits into coatings. She was talking about cool coatings, IR reflective ones, insect repelling powder coatings, which I thought was really interesting. I want to get me some of that for my backyard.
Well, it's interesting because, there's in the first world, the mosquitoes by and large are it's more of a pest. But when you get into developing nations, it's a matter of life and death. And these insect repelling powder coatings have a 62% efficacy of repelling specific mosquitoes that carry some of the more terrible viruses like Zika and yellow fever. So that was kind of cool. But she gave a nice sampling of some of these new developments. And another one was photocatalytic, which the surface of the coating in the presence of UV light converts pollution, in particular it's nitrous oxides, into harmless nitrates. So it was cool. It was great. It was, next time hopefully we'll be able to see her in person.
Absolutely. And all right, the second talk was Rich Zarnicki from Micro Powders. They're a company that makes wax additives for powder coatings and other applications. But they were talking about graphene oxide in powder form that can be used as an additive for powder coatings. But he was mostly focused on its performance as a corrosion inhibitor.
Yeah, and the data that was generated did show some improvements in some of the formulations. So pretty interesting stuff.
Well, and the thing that's interesting with that is they take the graphene, they package it on a wax that's easy to disperse in a coating. And that's where I think, you can just put graphene directly into your mix. But I think focusing on how to disperse it right is a big part of why you get the kind of results that you get.
It's all about deagglomeration, Nate. It's all about deagglomeration. So the next one was a pigment type technology. Basically, it's a white pigment additive, and this was given by Ilkka Tamminen from FP Pigments. Gave a good talk on a useful technique to extend titanium dioxide, which is in short supply.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, it's an extender, so you get more opacity with less TiO2, which, anybody that's trying to buy TiO2 right now knows how hard that is to do.
So you want to give these guys a call. They're global. FP Pigments, their world headquarters is in Finland, but they really are. They've got offices throughout the world. We've got a good friend in the UK. Certainly they're in North America, so give those guys a shout if you're looking at extension of TiO2.
All right, and on the other end of the color spectrum, our next talk was about carbon black, and that was from Orion Carbon Blacks.
Yeah, it was an excellent presentation by Trinh Nguyen from Orion Engineered Carbons, and she was signed up to do the 2020 PC Summit, which we had to postpone until this year. But she gave a very energetic, enthusiastic presentation about just a ton of data that was generated looking at all sorts of different carbon blacks, different ways that they were produced, and also different particle sizes, and then their effect in different powder coating binders.
Right. Yeah, it did seem like the primary particle size of carbon black has such an effect on the tint strength and the jetness, and they just had a huge amount of information about all those different factors that go into it. It's really interesting, I thought.
Yeah, the other thing that caught my attention, Nate, was she showed results in different types of binder chemistry, and in particular was a polyester-based powder versus a hybrid or epoxy polyester, and the difference in the binder had a difference in dispersion and color development. So anybody looking into doing a deep dive into carbon black technology should give these guys a shout.
All right, and then sensing a pattern here, we're on pigments still. Bonnie Pirro from Sudarshan, USA, gave a talk about organic pigments, and in particular, they have different treatments on them, and it seems like it really does have an effect on your end result when you have different grades of pigments that have different kinds of treatments, how they incorporate, how they disperse.
Yeah, it was really interesting because, have to give a full disclosure here. We did a lot of the work for them, but we were evaluating for them grades of pigments that were directed towards 3 different types of materials or technologies, specifically those designed for plastics, those designed for coatings, and those designed for printing inks.
Yeah, and powder is interesting because in its processing form, it has a lot in common with plastics, the way that we incorporate the materials together, but in its end use, it's a coating. So, you've always asked, like, would you look at a raw material that's for the plastics or for, something that's traditionally for liquid paint, for instance? And, sometimes it's one, sometimes the other. Sometimes you have to just look at all the information that's available.
Yeah, but the results that she presented were quite interesting. And by and large, the plastics grade pigments performed the best, had the best color development in powder coating. So that was good. Really good. Thanks, Bonnie. The next presentation was actually the following morning, and that was the keynote address from a good friend of mine from long ago. We worked together, Kevin Hales, who is the global product manager for powder coating innovation in automotive. And I know I've got that mixed up a little bit, but he's the innovation manager for automotive powder coatings in AkzoNobel.
Yeah, he gave a really good overview of, the history of where powder coatings have been used in automotive, and then a lot about the new opportunities as the technology, they're making automobiles differently than they did 20, 30 years ago. And so the requirements for what sort of coatings are used are going to change too. Part of that is, the materials are changing, the light weighting and things like that. They're using more plastics and composites and non-metallic substrates, which, we've talked extensively about, the ways that powder can be used there. But also with more and more of the market going to electric vehicles, it seems like there's a lot of under the floorboard kind of parts that it seems like powder is really a good application for.
Yeah, and the other thing that Kevin presented was he said, the trends are, and I think we've heard this before, but the trends are, he said on a worldwide basis by 2025, the production of automotive cars and small trucks, 25% of the production is going to be electric vehicles or EVs. That's worldwide. He said that they're predicting 100% of the vehicles produced in China and India by the year 2030 are going to be electric. Kind of amazing growth.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of the interesting, specifically powder coating related automotive things are coming out of Asia. They've got full body top coats on, the Tatas and the Cherries and some of those, lower cost vehicles that are out there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I kind of cut my teeth in the industry developing technology for automotive, powder coatings, and it was a big development in North America, and North America and Western Europe led in the technology and the commercialization. Things went cool after the turn of the century, and lo and behold, the places where things were happening were, like you mentioned, Tata and Chery. Those are, two gigantic automotive companies, but they have either single coat or it's a, e-coat primer followed by a powder top coat for a number of their product lines. But Scania, which is out of Sweden, but there's other, JAC out of China with small trucks. And I can't pronounce this one, Nate, but it's Bioma out of China. They picked up the mantle, and they've been powder coating as a body coat for these entry-level small cars, which is tremendous, I think. And there's going to be growth. I really think there's going to be growth across the board in those regions. The last thing I want to add, Nate, before we talk about the next presentation was, we think about powder coatings as body coats, but if you look at the square meters of coating required for the electrical drivetrain of a new EV automobile, the body coats and the electrical component coats, it's about 50-50. They're about the same amount of material used per vehicle. So we're looking at a substantial amount of powder being used in the future. So I'll kind of leave it with that.
All right. Well, the next talk after that was Matt Salvi from King Industries, and he was talking about a new catalyst for low temperature powder coatings. And it seems like they might have something interesting there. He was comparing it against imidazoles, which are kind of the, standard chemistry that we use a lot for catalyzing, reducing the cure temperature of our coatings. But yeah, I think they have a new kind of a chemistry that they're looking at.
Yeah, this one's it's carboxylate chemistry. I don't know if he specified, what type of carboxylate, but regardless, they did some pretty extensive work comparing it to two different imidazoles and saw some pretty encouraging results. I think more work needs to be done, and they were just kind of introducing the technology and what some of its capability could be. But good job, Matt. Yeah, and it's nice to see new speakers, and it's nice to see new technology. So that was a good talk.
For sure. All right, we'll come right back to it after this word from our sponsors.
Are you looking for a solution to coat your most difficult products with no touch-up? Then Gama's dynamic contouring equipment is the right solution for you. Unlike robotic coating, dynamic contouring offers greater flexibility without all the programming hassle, while correctly positioning each powder gun to automatically coat your parts. For more information, call 877-437-6771. Once again, that's 877-437-6771. And be sure to mention, Ask Joe sent me. Automate it, position it, detect it, code it. Complete it with Gama.
The Powder Coating Research Group is a proud sponsor of the Ask Joe Powder Podcast. PCR is the only independent laboratory dedicated to powder coating technology. We do everything from raw material evaluation, formulating the next generation of coatings, new product development, testing, troubleshooting, training, and consulting. To find out more, visit our website at powdercoatingresearch.com, or you can email Kevin Biller at kevinbiller@yahoo.com. Thanks for listening to the Ask Joe Powder Podcast.
Okay, the next one we want to talk about was a rather technical but very accessibly delivered presentation by Vinay Mishra from Jayhawk. They make dianhydrides, and his talk focused on BTDA.
Yeah, he was talking about using this, essentially it's a curing agent for high temperature epoxy applications. So, when we talk about epoxy, usually we are, assuming it's high performance in one way or another, but these are kind of exceptional because the cured coating is supposed to be able to hold up to a higher operating temperature, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting how these things tie in together, Nate. Kevin Hales was talking about the requirements for the EV components where they need higher temperature resistance and dielectric constant and insulative effects, and BTDA is used for that specific reason in composites. So powder coating technology can borrow from the way it's used in composites. So
the next presentation was back to the topic of pigments, but this one was from Mark Ryan from Shepherd Color. And it's interesting because, they make inorganic pigments, but this was about a study that they're doing where they put a whole bunch of their pigments into fluoropolymer-based powder coatings, and they're just doing all the weathering tests that you can think of. It's been ongoing for a couple of years, so they have a lot of the accelerated data, the weathering cabinets, and I think there was some Amaqua there.
Yeah, there was some Amaqua.
But, they're probably going to leave them on a fence in Florida for 50 years too.
Yeah, and, this was from our good friend Mark Ryan, as you mentioned. And this is a long-term, test series. He said that the 2-year South Florida were coming off in October, as we're speaking here. So this was more of an update on where things are, and everything's looking great, as you could expect after 2 years. The next presentation was by another one of our friends, and I got to give hats off to our good friend Bernie Resch of Evonik. Bob Lynn was originally the speaker for this one, and luckily Bernie was able to craft his own presentation on the same subject. Bob has moved on in his career, but Bernie gave a great presentation on a new matting agent, which is based on amorphous, spherically shaped silica, which it's pretty low specific gravity, but the stuff works really well. So it's looking like a good option for matting and powder.
Yeah, it's an interesting piece of technology, just as a matting additive. I also thought that, he presented some really interesting data. Like, I don't know. I always like seeing visualizations of things like the way that he showed them. And,
he had some really cool like surface topography stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Where
really good stuff.
That's always fun to see. All right, and the next one was from Connie Przlowski from AGC, and they're the people that make the fluoropolymer resins that are pretty commonly used for hyper durable or long term outdoor durable powder coatings. And her presentation was focused on a lot of observations they made about processing conditions, especially with extrusion conditions, where if you're outside of the right kind of processing window, you might not end up with an ideal coating. So
very instructive, and that's it was a good lesson, I think, to anyone evaluating raw materials in anything really. I mean, in powders specifically, but other types of formulated products, liquid paints or other things, that you've got to be wise and you have to keep your eyes open as to, does this stuff process a little differently? And am I missing something by just, not taking care to look at maybe a couple of different processing conditions? Because her results are pretty graphic. The mixing and certainly the extrusion conditions were very important.
Yeah, and the presentation that came after that one was also about surface texture, but this one was a little different. This one was from Lan Yo. She's a color researcher at Akzo Nobel Coatings, and it was about digitalizing surface texture. And I think they did a lot of the work with the BIC instrument people, where they're able to scan the surface of a coating and actually numerically describe what's going on there, instead of, a lot of what we do is comparative or, maybe even a little subjective, where you say, oh, the texture's in between this one and that one.
Yeah.
But they're talking about gathering lots and lots of data and doing lots of readings of the surface of these things and then correlating results based on that.
Yeah, they did a great job. And they took, they had the actual samples themselves, which I think it numbered in the hundreds. And they had quality control people, research people, and marketing people all do their interpretation. And they did a huge statistical analysis of it so that they could really describe what the numbers meant to the human eye. And I got to say one last thing about that presentation. That was another recorded one. That one came from Lana's, her home base is in the Netherlands, working for Akzo Nobel. But she had the best introduction of all these great presentations. She was with her phone and she was on a walk in a nature park, And she said, "Oh, don't worry. You didn't get the wrong presentation. I thought it'd be good to just say hello from this beautiful field, near my home." And I thought it was just great. It made me smile. It got my attention, and it was a great presentation regardless. So, yeah, that was a good technique.
All right, and the final presentation, it was from Cal Easiagu from Allnex, the resin company. And
that's Allnex with a small A.
He was talking about gloss control in powder coating, HAA resin specifically, which is a pretty interesting topic. I think that this is a new, kind of the new trend out of the resin companies is they're finding new ways to do a one-shot flow gloss HAA, which has usually been difficult to do.
He did a really nice job with providing a survey of the different gloss lowering techniques that were used, which was interesting because you gave the talk at the PC Kitchen 2.0 about gloss reduction, and it was just really cool to see two industry experts like you and Cal, independently have a very similar presentation on the various ways to lower gloss in powder. So it was pretty cool. But it looks like good technology. Yeah, and I would encourage anyone who's formulating polyester powders to contact those guys. All right, before we go, I'd like to talk just briefly about upcoming events.
Hey, friends, where are we going? To an upcoming event.
Probably the most noteworthy would be the 2022 PC Summit will be co-located with Coatings, Trends, and Technologies in the Chicago area next year. It's going to be the first week in September, and it's in a town outside of Chicago, in Lombard, Illinois. We're going to be sharing the venue with our friends from Coatings, Trends, and Technologies.
Yeah, we had a lot of questions about this. The way I see it, the two events really have a lot of the same theme. I think that CTT has historically been, it's been about liquid coatings, and it's aimed at those formulators for liquid coatings. And, we have an event that's pretty similar, but it's all about powder coatings. I think that by actually combining them in some ways, we get our materials from the same raw material people a lot of the times. And
it's kind of similar to what they did with the Powder Coating Institute event, their powder technical event, whatever they call it. They call it the Powder Coating Week or whatever. But they co-produce or co-locate with CCAI, which is Chemical Coaters Association International, and they just find it there's enough overlap that you can do them in the same week. How we do it with Coatings, Trends, and Technology, we're going to see, but I think we're going to have separate tracks, and we're going to focus on powder coatings where, our part of the program, and liquid paint guys will be down the hall. Yeah. The other thing I want to say about upcoming events is Abrafati has been postponed till 2022. It had been originally scheduled for November, I think it was.
It was scheduled for September, and then it got pushed back to the end of November, beginning of December.
Okay.
And then they just announced that they're going to be delaying it again. So that's a big show. So
yeah, they're going to delay it. It's scheduled for 22nd and 23rd of June.
Oh, wow.
Again in Sao Paulo.
All right, well, hope they can keep that on track.
All right, well, thanks everybody for your attention. This was a special edition of our humble Astro Powder podcast.
Yeah, and you can find us online at askjoepowder.com if you want to be the first to know when a new episode comes out, because they aren't always on the same schedule. Just subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. We also have a YouTube page that you can find all of our old episodes, and we'll be adding our new episodes as they come. If you want to ask a question, the email address is askjoepowder@yahoo.com. or you can call and leave a message, country code 1-478-2-ASK-JOE. That's 1-478-227-5563. This has been a production of the ChemQuest Powder Coating Research. And I just want to give a shout out to Nick Page. We always give him credit for doing the music, the editing, the sound effects, all that sort of stuff. But he's coming out with a new music video that has everything to do with powder coatings. Check that out on our YouTube. We'll have a link for you in the description.
And I think we're going to have the audio instead of outtakes, although there probably were plenty that could qualify this time. Stick around. I think you're going to really enjoy Nick's most recent creation.
And keep your powder dry.
Thank you for listening to the Ask Joe Powder Powdcast. This episode was brought to you by Gema. Gema's Optiflex Pro manual gun uses Power Boost technology, which gives you the industry's highest charging power at 110,000 volts and 110 microamps, allowing for faster and more efficient powder coating. We're handing you more power, more quality, and more control. For a demonstration, call 877-437-6771. Once again, that's 877-437-6771. And be sure to mention, Ask Joe sent me. When you want to know that everything is covered, complete it with Gema. Joe Powder gave me a job, and now I take the bus to the job that he gave me. Unless I don't take the bus, then I just pay a whole bunch to park. Take raw materials out of big bags and I mix them with other materials from bags, and they all go into a much smaller bag that I shake and mix and blend. The blended out stuff gets fed in a machine that heats it and smashes it into a goo. The goo goes through rollers to come out cold and flat. Grinding and sieving, grinding and sieving, this is the life that I'm happy to have now I'm living. For grinding and sieving, out of the sieve comes a powder with which I can shoot things, 'cause I've got a gun. But it doesn't shoot bullets, it shoots powder, static, and air. Static charged powder sticks to the ground and substrate and stays there unless I drop it. Then I just bake it at the time and the temperature required. Once it's cooled down and I've seen that it's flawed because I didn't clean things enough, clean things again, and that's when it's time to try again. Grinding and sieving, grinding and sieving, this is the life that I'm happy to have now I'm living. For grinding and sieving, grinding and sieving, grinding and sieving, this is the life that I'm happy to have now I'm living. For grinding and sieving, Joe Powder gave me a job, and now I take the bus to the job that he gave me. Thank you, Joe.